Hello and welcome to Right Sports Talk. My name is Zach, and we have made it through the first week of UFL football. In week one, I went 2-2 with my predictions. Now let's get into these picks for week two. So week two of UFL action kicks off this Friday, April 3rd. You can watch that game at 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox as the DC Defenders, who are 0-1, travel to take on the Columbus Aviators, who are also 0-1. The Defenders are coming off of a loss to the St. Louis Battlehawks. The Aviators are coming off of a loss to the Orlando Storm. Now, DC in their game, their offense really struggled against St. Louis. They couldn't really get anything going in the run game, only having 73 total rushing yards. And then even Jordan Teamu very much struggled against the St. Louis defense, as he only had 123 passing yards and threw two interceptions, didn't have any touchdowns, and was sacked 7 times. The defense for DC did play very well. They only gave up 16 points to the Battlehawks, but unfortunately they could not force any turnovers, and that was the big difference maker for them in that game. So although they did not give up a whole lot of points to St. Louis, they also did not do great in the turnover battle, with having 2 turnovers to St. Louis and did not get any takeaways against them, ultimately leading to their very close loss. Now, as for Columbus, the Aviators, they had a very well-balanced offense against Orlando. Offense played well. They had 120 total rushing yards between their big 3 running backs, with Zaquandre White, Toa Taua, and John Lovett. White actually having a rushing touchdown, their only offensive touchdown of the game. Jalen McMillan, their quarterback, had a decent game. He played well. He had 212 passing yards, didn't have any turnovers, but also didn't throw any touchdowns. Defensively, Columbus played pretty well as well, having 4 sacks. Defensive lineman Ron Stone got 2 on his own, and then they just had some unfortunate penalties and some stuff that didn't quite go their way, and they had a few turnovers taken off the board for them, including 1 pick six, which would have absolutely been the difference maker, as they only lost by 7 points. So that's something that would have helped swing the momentum hugely in their favor, but due to penalties, they were ultimately playing from behind for most of that game. Now, getting my pick for this game, I think it would be a very close game, as both these defenses played very good. I think both these offenses can do better than they showed. I think especially DC has the potential to do more than they showed this past week. However, I'm going to go with the Columbus Aviators to win this game. I just really like their 3-headed monster they have at running back with White and Toa Taua, and love it. I think they can really get the run game going there. I think they can probably get the run game going against this DC defense, although their defense was pretty good against the Battlehawks rushing attempt. I think McClendon, if he can play efficient football, much like he did this past week, then and not make many mistakes, then I think that this offense will have a very good opportunity to move the ball and put points on the board. I think the big difference maker for this game is going to be this defense. I think that this defense is going to be able to get after Jordan Teamu, very similar to how the Battlehawks defense did. They're going to be able to disrupt him. I think they're probably going to force some turnovers that hopefully don't get taken away by penalties this time. But I do think that the Columbus Aviators will do enough to get the victory over the DC Defenders. The next game you have this weekend is Saturday, April 4th. That game is 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN, as the Louisville Kings, who are 0-1, take on the Orlando Storm, who are 1-0. Louisville is coming off of a loss to the Birmingham Stallions. Orlando is coming off of that victory over the Columbus Aviators. Louisville in their game against Birmingham, one of their major setbacks was they struggled a lot to try to run the ball against Birmingham's defense. They only had 46 total rushing, total of 46 rushing yards on the game, and they only tried to run the ball 16 times. So they kind of gave up on the run. Jason Bean was their leading rusher, and he didn't really have a whole lot of yards. He was, leading rusher from the quarterback position. Jason Bean at quarterback did a pretty good job. He threw for 226 passing yards and did have a touchdown to wide receiver Lucky Jackson. Lucky Jackson seemed to be his favorite target on the game, having 73 receiving yards and that touchdown. Unfortunately for Jason Bean, in his first start, he threw two interceptions, one of which was right at the end of the game that really sealed their fate and in their loss. Now their defense in that game did good. That their defense kept them in the game for most of that game. It was just those couple of turnovers, and then their offense got stopped a few times on fourth down that ultimately cost them. But their defense kept Birmingham to only 15 points. They even blocked a field goal at one point in the game, so the defense was doing a bunch to try and get them the win, but they ultimately fell short. For Orlando, in their victory, they had a pretty balanced offense. They had 139 total rushing yards. They had their leading rusher was Jayshon Corbin, who had 66 yards on the ground and 2 rushing touchdowns. The quarterback, Jack Plummer, who this was his first ever start. He looked pretty good. He had 240 passing yards with a passing touchdown. He was also spreading the ball around quite a bit. He had 4 different receivers with at least 3 catches on the game. And then wide receiver Elijah Badger was his leading receiver. He had 4 catches for 127 yards. His 1 touchdown went to Chris Rowland. So he was pretty good. And then defensively, their defense played pretty good and showed up when they needed them, especially at the end of the game. They had 3 total sacks on the game and a very big one on Columbus's last drive to help seal the victory. It wasn't the last play of the game, but it made them ate up a lot of clock, and Columbus was only able to get 1 play off that didn't amount to much after that. So that sack made a huge difference to the outcome. Now, my pick for this game, I'm going to go with the Orlando Storm. I just think their offense played very efficient football. I think that should continue against this Louisville defense. I think their defense should be able to disrupt Jason Bean, who is still a very young quarterback. This is his first year in the UFL. He's only got 1 start under his belt. This is going to be his first time going on the road. So I think that Orlando, with their very balanced offense, their ability to run the ball, their Jack Plummer's ability to spread the ball around, their very dynamic receivers in Elijah Badger, Chris Rowland, and even KJ Hamler can do a lot to make big plays. And then their defense can really step up and disrupt the opposing team, really disrupt Jason Bean. And this Louisville rushing attack seems to be non-existent right now. So I do believe that the Orlando Storm will get the victory over the Louisville Kings. The third game of the weekend takes place Sunday, April 5th. This game is at 6 p.m. Eastern, and it is going to be on the NFL Network. As the Birmingham Stallions, who are 1-0, travel to take on the Houston Gamblers, who are 0-1. Birmingham coming off of their win over the Louisville Kings. Houston coming off of a loss to the Dallas Renegades. Birmingham, in their game against Louisville, their offense played well enough to win. They didn't make a whole lot of costly mistakes. Their real biggest mistakes was by quarterback Matt Corral, who had a few fumbles, but the offense was able to recover those. They didn't lead any turnovers. But aside from that, Matt Corral played good, efficient football. He had 208 passing yards with a touchdown. That one touchdown went to, I believe it was Justin Ross, and wide receiver Jaden Mickens had 102 receiving yards, who really helped bolster that receiving game for them. Of all the talented receivers they had, it was Jaden Mickens was the kind of surprise guy to step up and make the biggest impact on that game. And then the running game, their leading rusher was Snoop Connor, who had 56 rushing yards and a touchdown. He did good enough to kind of keep the chains moving, got in the end zone to really help them out. The defense came up clutch at multiple points. They had a few fourth down stops. They had at one point a forced fumble when Louisville was right at the goal line that they recovered, that Birmingham recovered to force a turnover. I believe that was right before the half, and that helped really swing the momentum. As I mentioned, they had the 2 interceptions, including that second one, to really seal the game for them. Their only major struggles in that game was in their kicking game, as their kicker, Jonathan Garibay, was 1 for 2 out of his field goals. The one that he missed wound up being blocked, and he even missed an extra point. His first extra point attempt of the game, he missed it. So, they kind of allowed Louisville to stay in the game by leaving points off of the board in the kicking game. That was their major struggle point. As for Houston, their offense against Dallas, they struggled early on in the game when they had quarterback Nolan Henderson in, as he very early in the game wound up throwing 2 interceptions, and one of them was returned and one of them was a pick six by Dallas that really put him down early. After that, Nolan Henderson was pulled, and they put in quarterback Hunter Deckers, and he actually came in and played pretty well. He had 227 passing yards. He also led the team in rushing yards with 28. So the rushing attack was very much struggling. Hunter Deckers also had a rushing touchdown. So rushing attack was struggling. Hunter Deckers came in and looked pretty good. And then their defense, they didn't play as well as I thought they were going to, looking at the talent on their defense side of their ball, the defensive side of their team. I thought that they were going to perform a lot better than they did, as they did not really have any answer for Dallas's offense and couldn't really stop quarterback Austin Reed for Dallas. He kind of carved them up in that game. Now, as for my pick in this game, I'm going to go with the Birmingham Stallions. They're a team that I think they just have too much talent on that roster. They have a very talented offense. Matt Corral, being the experienced quarterback, if he plays like he did this past week, he can cut down on the fumbles and just hang on to the ball, play efficient football, get the ball in the hands of his playmakers, whether that be Jaden Mickens, whether that be Deion Kane, whether it be Justin Ross or John Ross, one of those very talented receivers. Maybe Dawood Davis, if he's healthy. He sat out of this past week's game with an injury. And obviously they have a lot work going for them in the running game, as they've got Snoop Connor. They've also got Anthony McFarland, who's a very talented running back that can help them out. And I think defensively they can do a lot to disrupt Hunter Deckers, much like they did Jason Bean for Louisville last week. I think they can shut down this running game that is another team that struggled to run the football. I think they can slow down the run of this Houston offense. And I guess we'll see this Houston defense, if it was more so the team they were playing in Dallas for their lack of defensive success, or if it's just how their defense is going to look. But I do think the Birmingham Stallions get the victory over the Houston Gamblers. Now, the final game of UFL Week 2 actually takes place on a Tuesday night, as it takes place Tuesday, April 7th at 8 p.m. on FS1. The St. Louis Battlehawks, who are 1-0, take on the Dallas Renegades, who are also 1-0. Houston coming off of their win over the DC Defenders. Dallas coming off of their win over the Houston Gamblers. In their game against DC, St. Louis's offense, another offense that just played well enough to win with their veteran, experienced quarterback, Brandon Silvers. He did a good job as being game manager in that game. He had 198 passing yards. He had a passing touchdown. He didn't turn the ball over, which was one of the major difference makers in that game for their offense. Their running game actually did struggle a little bit. They only had 64 total rushing yards, and their leading rusher, Jarvion Howard, only had 45 rushing yards. I don't know if that speaks more to what their offense is going to look like or how good that DC defense actually played. And defensively for St. Louis, their defense was the major difference maker in that game. They had 7 total sacks to defense. 2.5 of them came from edge rusher / linebacker Pita Tiamu Apeno. He was a very big disruptor on their defense. They kind of moved him all around that offensive line. They moved him. They had him rush from the middle, rush from the guard, rush from the outside as a traditional edge rusher, and he was just really disrupting Jordan Ta'amu. And then they also had their 2 interceptions, which were some of the major difference makers as well for that defense. Now, as for the Dallas Renegades, their offense went off against Houston, led by quarterback Austin Reed in his first ever start for the UFL. He had 376 passing yards, setting a new UFL record for passing yards. He also had 3 passing touchdowns. Wide receivers Tyler Vaughns and Greg Ward really led the way in their receiving game, as Vaughns had 144 receiving yards and a touchdown, and Ward had 93 receiving yards with a touchdown. I guess the only real downside of their offense was that they didn't really do a whole lot in the running game. Their leading rusher was Lorenzo Lingard. He only had 36 rushing yards, but when you have 376 passing yards and your quarterback's able to throw the ball all over the defense you're playing, you're not really going to establish much in a run game. And then Dallas's defense, they did look good, especially early on of their pass defense, especially when Nolan Henderson was in the game at quarterback. Once Hunter Deckers went in, he was finding more success against this defense. But this Dallas rush defense looked great the entire game, and holding Houston to very little rushing success, and their leading rusher only having 28 rushing yards. So their run defense was held up very well for them. This is a game that's very difficult to pick. I can honestly see it going either way based from how these 2 teams played in week 1. But I am going to go with the St. Louis Battlehawks to get the victory here. I think that their offense will perform much better than Houston's did. I think Brandon Silvers should be able to find success against this pass defense of the Renegades. I think that Jarvion Howard should hopefully be able to get more involved in the rushing game and have a better week than he did last week. I think that offensively, this Battlehawks team is much more talented and too talented to really be shut down by this Renegades defense. Hopefully, this Battlehawks offense will have Hakeem Butler for this game. The wide receiver was out this past week with an injury, and he can hopefully be a big difference maker for them if he can play. If not, I do like Jacure Pearson. He's still a very talented receiver in his own right for them. And I think one of their big difference makers is going to be St. Louis's defense. Especially that pass rush. They're coming off of getting 7 sacks against a very talented quarterback in Jordan Ta'amu. I'm interested to see what they will do against this young quarterback in Austin Reed. If Reed can, perform. I don't think he'll perform as well as he did against Houston. That might be a once in a career type game in the UFL with having that many passing yards. But if he can find, somewhat success against this defense, but I think this defense will do a good job of shutting him down. I think they'll be able to, slow down the run game of the Renegades. We don't really know what the run game is capable of, but I trust this Battlehawks defense to get after the quarterback, to slow down the run game. If Dallas tries to establish a run game, and then I trust this Battlehawks offense to be efficient, to take care of the football, to play very smart football on offense. So I do think that the St. Louis Battlehawks get the victory over the Dallas Renegades. Those are my picks for week 2 of the UFL season. Let me know in the comments who you guys think is going to win matchups this week. And we go matchups you're looking forward to. I'm actually looking forward to this Battlehawks Renegades matchup. I'm interested to see what Austin Reed looks like in his second game. If this Battlehawks defense can disrupt him, what's going to happen if he faces some adversity. But let me know in the comments what you guys are excited about. Just excited for UFL football. I'm excited that it's back. I had a great time watching the week 1 games. I'm excited for the rest of the season. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. Till next time.